Have you ever wondered if someone is just kind of clueless about how to interact with people, or if they're just plain mean, or maybe even truly emotionally abusive or destructive? Well, I'm going to dive into this topic today because there's a lot of confusion surrounding it, and I want to really help you get some clarity so that you can decipher this without so much confusion. If you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a life recovery coach specializing in relationships. So what I do is I help my clients go back on a subconscious level so they can reframe what the belief was that's driving their unwanted behavior or their unwanted feelings or patterns on a subconscious level so they can function differently in the world, creating the life and love that they want. So if you'd like to learn more, there is a link in the description below. You can visit my website and you can set up a totally free complimentary consultation call so that I can get some clarity about what's going on with you, and I can help you get some clarity as to why that's happening and make my best recommendations as to whether or not I think we'd be a good fit to work together. So you can check that all out there. So before I dive in, I do want to remind you to click like and subscribe so you can be notified every time I post a new video. So when we're talking about cluelessness versus someone who's actually just really mean-spirited, the reality is that cluelessness really equals emotional immaturity. It's a lack of awareness. And so when something happens, this person doesn't pick up on the social cues, they aren't really aware of how their behavior is affecting the people around them, and it tends to happen with everyone in their life. At work, with friends, in social settings, it's not really just isolated to one person. They tend to lack the ability to pick up on those things, either because they are literally immature and young, or they haven't cultivated the emotional maturity, or they may have some issues with picking up on social cues from other people. They may be somewhere on that spectrum. And really, this entire way of relating sort of exists on a spectrum. So if someone's clueless, and you tell them how their behavior made you feel or what that experience was like for you, they're going to want to change that. They're going to feel some level of remorse. I remember specifically as a very little kid, my mom had collected these mint coins. Like, they were sealed up and they were a big deal. If you opened them, they lost their value. And so I was very aware of the value of that. Well, I was at a friend's house, and this friend and their siblings were showing me that they had been given each of them a mint coin, like sealed in the container. And one of them had opened theirs. And so I made a knee-jerk response like, that was really dumb. Like, you shouldn't have done that. You lost all the value in that. And it was a super rude comment that I made. And this little girl started crying and was really upset, and I immediately felt remorse. Like, I immediately realized that that wasn't a kind thing for me to say, and it caused me internal pain to know that she was in pain, and I was truly sorry. And so that's an example of the fact that cluelessness, whether it's physical immaturity, being a little kid and not knowing these rules, or it's emotional immaturity that hasn't been cultivated, it will produce some remorse response. Now, when it comes to emotional abuse or someone who is really not remorseful, they're trying to be mean, you're going to see this more isolated. So it's not typical that they're going to do this with the general public because they have a level of awareness that tells them, I have to behave a certain way to have acceptance publicly. And so the only times you really see this play out in someone publicly who is emotionally abusive is if you're dealing with like a grandiose style of narcissism where they are just kind of blatantly arrogant to everyone, and it's not that kind of covert behavior that's more isolated. So when there's confusion involved, it's usually because you're dealing with that covert version of behavior. And so it's more isolated to the person in their life that has the potential to be the closest to them. So usually it's a spouse. And if you're a spouse, then you are the one person that is going to challenge that person to be vulnerable. You're the one person who they are at risk for being vulnerable with because you are so intimately connected. So when this is something that is really destructive, you're going to see that this person probably plays the devil's advocate with the things that you say and think and do. And even if, let's say, they held a viewpoint specifically on the subject at one time, now you hold that viewpoint, they might flip their opinion and actually side with the other side that they didn't used to agree with, but now suddenly magically they do. So they can play devil's advocate with you. They might deny your reality. They might say you're too sensitive, you can't take a joke, they dismiss your feelings as being invalid or dumb. They aren't willing to hear you out or hold space for how they affect you. They might really make you the butt of a joke, especially in a situation where they know you can't say or do anything about it because you're in front of other people. And so you kind of laugh along. But they're using this tactic to sort of make you small and sort of make themselves feel and look bigger. And they usually refuse to communicate, and they act like you should be able to read their mind. Like, well, you should have known that I was going to do that. Don't I always do that? Or, when you make some kind of comment about wanting more communication, or you didn't tell me you were doing that, or hey, I felt out of the loop here, they'd make a dismissive comment as if you should probably be able to read their mind and you should have known better, instead of owning that they actually did not communicate effectively. They oftentimes will blame you. If you say, hey, I'm feeling closed off from you, they might say, I don't need to be attacked like that. Like, they get instantly defensive when you're bringing up something that you need or a connection desire that you have. And they use a lot of statements like always and never. You always do this and you never do that. And they tend to blow things kind of out of proportion in a really big way. They oftentimes refuse to give you praise. So let's say you do something around the house, like you work really hard, like cleaning out and reorganizing the whole pantry. And then when you tell them about it, they say something like, it should have been kept that way all along. Or, lucky that you have time to do that. I'm way too busy to do things like that. They just dismiss your accomplishments, whether it's something creative like a painting that you did or an interest that you have. They really refuse to give you any amount of praise or acknowledgement for your talents, your gifts, your inspirations, your hard work. And they oftentimes will order you to do things instead of asking. They're not like, hey, would you mind doing this when you have time? Instead, they'll be like, could you just get this out of here? Would you just take care of this crap already? Like, it's very demanding and ordering. And so there's not a level of cluelessness in this. There is really a harshness and a disregard for how their behavior is affecting the other person, even when the other person shares with them how their behavior is affecting them. They dismiss those remarks and they minimize them and treat it with a lot of harshness. Now, emotional abuse and emotionally destructive behavior like this is often a result of a disorganized attachment style. So they really want closeness. They probably didn't get it when they were children, and they really desire that closeness, but they're also terrified of any amount of vulnerability. And so when the closeness feels too much, they push their partner away by picking a fight. And so this is why a lot of times the fights don't make sense. They don't register as a logical thing to be bickering about. They feel like they came out of nowhere. And it's because they're using anything to create distance with their partner. And so you often feel this push-pull happening where they really do push, or they pull you in because they want closeness and connection. And they might be like, I want to be by you. I want to sit by you. I want to hold your hand. I want you to come here. Let's do, whatever it is. And then they're picking fights with you to push you away and create distance. And it's happening on a subconscious level. So these fears and triggers are coming up from a place that they aren't even aware of. They've been doing this their whole life. This is their protection mode. This is their self-defense, because if someone really sees them and they're really vulnerable with them, then that person might see how awful they really are. That's how they're feeling about themselves, or the truth about them, or that they're a fraud. And so they try to keep up appearances, but in the process they do this push-pull, and it can become really confusing. Whereas someone who's just clueless is going to want to understand more, even if it's a struggle for them. They're going to want to learn more, and they're going to feel some remorse, where these people with the emotional abuse patterns typically don't. Now, this exists on a whole spectrum. Some people could be really severe and actually be like a narcissistic personality type. And then you can have someone on sort of the other end of the spectrum that's really just suffering from attachment trauma and their childhood wounds and complex trauma, and they have never been taught how else to relate, and they've never honestly taken the time to get the help they need to address the issues. And so there's everything in between. So at the end of the day, the bottom line is, does their behavior damage you? Is their behavior causing you to think less of yourself, causing you to lose your self-esteem or self-worth, causing you so much confusion, sending you into fight or flight panic mode? Does it have you walking on eggshells? If it's damaging you and making your life miserable, then that's really all that matters at the end of the day. The why is less important than how it's affecting you. And so that's really important to keep in mind, above and beyond any other solutions or fixes that I'll give you here. And it's really important to understand that this is all happening on a subconscious level. So the subconscious mind is programmed when we're really young, and it's running over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. But you don't have access to it. It's guarded. And so really the only way you have direct access is in the hypnotherapy process, so that you can go back, address those beliefs that were created back then that are driving your unwanted feelings and behaviors. And so that's the most rapid way that you can address any attachment style issue or any behavior that's really not playing out well for you in your life. And so, of course, that's my best recommendation. But to get a little clarity, if you are a partner of someone who's doing this, you can do a few things. When things start to get elevated and you feel that your heart rate's coming up, you can take a time out. Take an hour break, let your heart rate come down, relax, and then you can actually calm your nervous system. When you come back to them after that, you can calmly share your feelings and make a request for changed behavior, something you'd like to see different the next time. Now you can actually measure whether or not they're willing to take that request seriously. So it's a data gathering process. You've been clear, you've been vulnerable, you've made the request. Now you can see whether or not they're actually willing to get some help for this. And I want you to watch and take notes. That's really the third step. Once you make a request, I want you to take notes. First of all, because when you're going into fight or flight, the blood is being pushed out of the frontal lobe part of your brain and into your large muscle groups, so you can get brain fog. So your memory might not hold up quite as well on these situations. So take notes so you have clarity. And also take notes so you can see if they have a genuine desire for change. And if you don't see a pattern of genuine desire for change where they're reaching out and getting the help they need, then I think you have your answer that this is just toxic and probably really damaging to you. So I help my clients address these subconscious issues every day through hypnotherapy. It's an incredible process. And again, if you'd like to learn more, check out those links in the description below. Set up that consultation call. I would love to talk with you and help you get even more clarity on your situation so that you don't have to live in a state of confusion and trying to just be a detective about why these things are happening. Because at the end of the day, if they're causing you damage, it's not worth it. So until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.